Welcome back. You're still tuned in to Salam Media. The time is 9:42 Central African Time, and the name of the show is News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. And the countdown, as the countdown to the 2026 FIFA World Cup gathers pace, questions are being raised, not only just about football itself, but about politics. The conversations around visas and who will actually be able to attend the football spectacle out in the United States. Which is also co-hosted by Canada and Mexico. But it is facing growing scrutiny. This is over the US's immigration policies, travel bans affecting fans from parts of Africa and other parts of the world, and concerns also about how politics may spill into the sport. FIFA, long-standing advocate of not mixing the football with politics, but it looks like the two are now intersecting, and it's at a rate that has never been seen before. Another interesting factor was the fact that former FIFA president Sepp Blatter also came out. He added his voice to calls for a boycott of the World Cup, and yeah, he's far from the only figure who's raising these kind of red flags, and we'll be unpacking what this means for the global game, the United States of America being the host of a very, very important event. I think as South Africans who have once hosted the World Cup know the significance of it. I think it holds a very, very symbolic kind of demeanor to it when it comes to cohesion. Countries from all parts of the world, all converging in one space to play the beautiful game. Yanga, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate you giving us your time. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to speak with you guys.
No, the pleasure's all ours. And I think before we get into the nitty-gritties, there's been a lot of, conversations around the United States of America and them hosting the FIFA World Cup. They are not known to be a big footballing nation, maybe not the men's game, but in the women's game, they've definitely been in the forefront. What did you make of the decision to have the US as one of the organizers of this year's World Cup alongside Mexico and Canada?
I mean, I think because of the fact that FIFA has always been so, especially under the current president Gianni Infantino, has always been quite open about taking the game, to different parts of the world, exposing football to different parts of the world. It wasn't that much of a shocking decision. And of course, the US is the US. They've got all the infrastructure, they've got all the money, and they're also hosting the 2028 Olympics as well. So the decision to actually give them the hosting rights, I don't think was initially was not necessarily a bad one, because they're also co-hosting. So they don't have the load on their shoulders alone. They have Mexico, which is in the Americas, quite a healthy football nation. They've got a big heritage in the World Cup as well. And of course, Canada is probably not the one that would have been surprising, because they're not really into football in that regard. But I think it was part of FIFA's expansion to grow the game, to expose it to different audiences, and the USA is quite a big audience, and they're a very sport crazy nation, even though they enjoy their own sports more than anything. But the decision itself was not a bad one. But I think as the World Cup draws closer and there's a lot of noise, maybe some people in FIFA are questioning if the right decision in hindsight. But I think when it happened, it wasn't a bad decision.
And I want to jump into some of those concerns, which a lot of people are arguing that could essentially be quite good enough reasons to boycott this World Cup. The policies under this new second coming of Donald Trump, particularly around immigration. We've had weeks after weeks, countries being added to travel bans to the US, and just the general treatment of migrants and protesters in the US. Do you think this makes America a hostile environment for international visitors, particularly for a tournament like the FIFA World Cup, which we know draws people from all across the world, and is supposed to be a symbolic almost gesture of how the world can converge in one country and enjoy what we call the beautiful game?
I think just before I go into the US itself and what's going on there, I think uh, with any World Cup, from my memory, even with us in 2010, there's always going to be negativity around like a host nation. I remember when we hosted in 2010, there was a big concern, or rather a big focus from Western media on the crime in the country, and no one would be safe. People they were getting slaughtered like dogs in South Africa, apparently. And at the end of the day, the tournament happened, and it was a very successful tournament. In Russia, of course, there was also quite a lot of backlash. Why would you give Russia, who's run by a dictator, the World Cup? So this World Cup is, like you said, is supposed to be inclusive, but there was a lot of concern when Russia hosted in 2018 as well. The racism, would people be welcome? Would people of the LGBTQI community be welcome? And again, 4 years ago in Qatar, there was similar arguments. So I think with every World Cup, there's always going to be pre-noise before the tournament takes place. But yeah, like you said, the concerns that have been raised by multiple people that are involved in football and follow the game are also valid, because if you watch the news, you would have seen it's there for everyone to see what's going on in the US. And yeah, there's a lot of I think, I wouldn't say necessarily a hostile environment, but there's a lot of instability, if I can call it that. Yeah, there's a lot of instability there. And yeah, it's quite concerning for people coming from the outside. I mean, if the citizens themselves are concerned about what's happening in their country, if you're coming from the outside and you don't know anyone, you don't know anything, it's a foreign environment, it can be quite daunting. So yeah, it is quite a big concern, but also, like you said, with visas, the visa policies and the foreign policy in the US being so strict, you might not even have to worry about that, because you might not get a visa to go there. And even if you do get a visa, the tickets are quite expensive as well. So that's another factor to consider. Even though FIFA has said that there's a lot of demand for tickets, I think the last numbers that they released, they said there's about 500 million applications for tickets for the World Cup. So there is quite an interest still from people, but whether they'll be able to make it there is another story.
Another interesting kind of element to it, I think it was a few days ago, I think this past week, was former FIFA president Sepp Blatter, who has also weighed in, essentially backing calls for fans to stay away from the US this summer or winter, depending which part of the world you're in. How much weight do you think his comments actually carry today, Sepp Blatter, considering his controversial legacy? Do you think it almost dilutes the argument that he's making, calling for football fans to not make their way to the US for the upcoming World Cup?
Definitely, I think you hit the nail on the head. As much as he was involved in the game for years and years, the fact that the manner that he left the game in was he was a disgraced former FIFA president. It does pour cold water on his arguments and his stance, but also you can't completely dismiss what he's saying, because I feel like a lot of people hold the same sentiments, maybe not as powerful as he is or was, but a few people have spoken about the fact that not just fans, but teams themselves, nations and players should choose not to go to the US for the World Cup. But I don't think the latter would happen. Of course, fans, it's their right. They can choose what they do with their free time. But in terms of teams themselves refusing or not wanting to play in the US, I don't see that happening. There was, of course, like I'll go back to previous World Cups where people expressed their disdain of things that were happening maybe pre World Cup, or the fact that Russia, for example, was hosting a World Cup, but they still went and played there. So it won't be easy for teams to not go there and represent their countries, even though they have that feeling that they maybe don't want to be there, and the US right now is not what they stand for. But also the US hosted a successful Club World Cup last year, relatively successful besides the heat and all of that. But there wasn't many issues that people raised and said they were not welcome or they were treated. There were reports here and there, of course, but generally I think majority of the people had a decent time there, besides the heat, which of course is a factor for people that will be traveling there.
I want to come back to FIFA in itself, because a lot has been said about how they've always positioned themselves as being apolitical. They've always wanted politics to stay out of the game. But in recent years, we've seen them being thrusted into world politics, the dynamics that are happening all around. You look at the Russia-Ukraine war and how quickly they were when it comes to banning Russia from all, FIFA and UEFA activities. But then you look at Israel and the genocide that's being committed against the people of Palestine. They're still actively participating in FIFA competitions. They're still actively participating in UEFA competitions. Their clubs also are still in the Champions League. What do you make of how they've positioned themselves and how they've reacted to geopolitics, even when they unequivocally say we are apolitical, and concerns about the game in itself being sold to the highest bidder? I think Qatar and them hosting the World Cup, I think, was when you saw the beginning of those rumblings, and then you had that case which Gianni Infantino gifted Donald Trump that big trophy that no one has ever seen in their lives. FIFA in itself and how it interacts with politics, what's your analysis of that?
I think sports in general, as much as people say, politics must be out of sports, no politics in sports. Sports is a unifier and all those things. But it can be a tool that is used for good or bad by politics. And I mean, if you go back if you use South Africa as an example, FIFA was one of the organizations that banned South Africa from participating in their tournaments during the apartheid era. So it's not something new where they now they say, okay, we're not political, because for them to make that stance, they could have just said, no, South Africa, if you want to bring an all-white football team, it's fine. Team politics and football are two separate things, but they took a stance back then. So I don't understand now why it's so difficult to take a stance against Israel if they have to do that, because like you said, they did it with Russia, although they did it a bit late, because already with the World Cup being hosted in Russia, there was a lot of conflict. There was a lot of questions asked, why would you give this tournament to a country run by a dictator? So it's I don't know. I think it's double standards. I think I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. How the decisions are made, and what the thinking process is behind who's banned, who's not banned. But how it comes out in the public domain is definitely, there's a feeling of double standards. You act against these people, but you don't act against these ones. What criteria do you use to say, okay, Russia is totally banned because of what they're doing in Ukraine? But as much as there's so much that's in the public domain about what's happening also in Gaza, and you say, okay, no, that's, we're not getting involved in that. Football is not for politics. So it's quite confusing, honestly.
No, most definitely. Lastly, before I let you go, maybe if we can focus on the game in itself. South Africa, for the first time in almost 15 years, will be participating in the FIFA World Cup. The best preparation strategy for Hugo Bros, what would it be, considering AFCON and how maybe unsatisfactory that tournament was? I saw some countries already have come out with, some friendlies, major friendlies that they're going to be using as preparation for the World Cup. South Africa, not as yet. From your perspective, what would be the best way for our national team to be preparing for this World Cup if there won't be a travel ban on South Africa, considering our relationship with the US?
Yeah, I know. You never know. You might not end up going there because the US seems to have quite a beef with South Africa. But of course, it's not the US's tournament; it's FIFA's tournament. So I think at the end of the day, they would be the ones deciding. But of course, we saw what happened with the draw as well when some officials from Iran had to really fight to get visas to just go attend the draw. So for us as well, it might be something like that, but I don't think it will be anything hectic. As for the football itself, I don't think, of course, Liverpool has built a really, a decent team, a team with identity over the last 5 years that he's been in charge of Bafana Bafana. And yeah, he's built a team which is not really, shaped by stars or the one individual. Like France has Kylian Mbappe. He's the star. They've got a few stars, but he's the main man. In Bafana Bafana, I don't think there's anyone who stands out like that. It's more of a team. It's a team effort. Everyone plays their part. So I don't think he has to, even if, AFCON was disappointing and the outcome, of course, was disappointing for a number of South Africans. There's no need to dismantle the team. So you probably stick with a bulk of the same players, maybe a tweak here and there. And then, I think from there, there's not really much pressure. At the AFCON, there was pressure as well, for us to perform because after getting your first medal in over 24 years, then there's expectation to go from bronze to maybe gold. But at the World Cup, we've never made it past the group stages. If we do it, will be the first time we do it. So, our group is fair as much as, it may become difficult if Denmark make it to the via the playoffs and make it into the group. But I think we can compete and, we can make it past the group stages, even if we finish as one of the best placed teams as well. But I don't think we have anything to be afraid of. We will just go there and we'll play. In terms of preparations, I know there's a window now in March that's coming up for teams to play some friendlies. So SAFA will probably be working on getting the best opponents for South Africa to play against. I think they'll be looking for teams that that will test the team, and to show the coach where we are. Maybe a couple of
with all due respect, not Lesotho, please.
No. I think the recipe now will probably be balanced. You want a team that's gonna test you, but also you want a team that's not gonna embarrass you and beat you 5-0 because that's gonna confidence of the players. So it's about finding that type of opponent that's good enough to show the coach where we are in terms of what we need to compete at the World Cup, but also to boost the confidence of the players. So let's see what SAFA can pull together in terms of those friendlies that are upcoming.
There you have it, Yanga Sibembe, Daily Maverick sports journalist. Always a pleasure, my brother. Really appreciate you giving us the time once again.
Thank you for having me, and have a good day.
There we go. And with that, we've come to the end of today's edition of News and Views. I'll be back with you again tomorrow for the Thursday edition of the show. Inayat Wadi will be coming up later on today for Wednesday nights with Inayat Wadi. Otherwise, from myself, Salailo Makwidiri, and everyone that made today's show possible, it's Shap Shap. We'll see you again tomorrow.